Alright, so in this video I'm going to be rebutting Cass Sunstein's essay on cognitive diversity, which basically is a government proposed plan to have a conspiracy to stop conspiracy theorists. And yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous that the government would propose a conspiracy to stop conspiracy theorists, because it kind of is a contradiction, because if the government doesn't do conspiracies, then why are they proposing to do a conspiracy? You see what I'm saying? Sounds like a joke. I get it. It's funny. Haha. Anyway, so who is Cass Sunstein? According to Wikipedia, Cass Sunstein is an American legal scholar known for his studies of constitutional law, administrative law, environmental law, and behavioral economics. Now that one's kind of important because he wrote a book called Nudge, or his Nudge Theory, where basically he talks about using behavioral psychology to push people to make certain economic decisions, which in and of itself could be considered a conspiracy because, it's a hidden hand type of thing going on and they're trying to manipulate people into doing things. But of course, people won't categorize it as that. They'll just say, oh, well, he's an economist. He's trying to get people to do stuff. But when he works for the government, it's kind of, whatever. Okay. So basically, he was the administrator of the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs during the Obama administration from 2009 to 2012. So in his cognitive diversity essay, basically, he's proposing a plan to use government agents to infiltrate conspiracy, or what they're classifying as conspiracy groups, or people who believe in conspiracies, what they're classifying as, and infiltrate their groups, and then basically use sort of COINTELPRO type tactics to confuse people, sow dissension, things like that. So we'll just get into his essay. It's kind of a short essay, but I just want to rebut some of the points, and we can just look at it from here. So basically on the first page, he says, there's conspiracy theories all around us. In 2004, a poll by Zogby International showed that 49% of New York City residents, with a margin of error of 3.5%, believe that officials of the U.S. government knew in advance that the attacks were planned on or around September 11, 2001, and that they consciously failed to act. So you can read the rest of it if you want, but basically what he's saying is about half of the people in New York believe that the 9/11 attacks were basically the government knew they were going to happen and they looked the other way. Then he goes on to kind of explain more what he means by conspiracy theory, which he says conspiracy theory can generally be counted as such if it's an effort to explain some event or practice by reference to machinations of powerful people who attempt to conceal their role, at least until their aims are accomplished. Now, I guess you could define it as that, but really that's not the definition of a conspiracy. A conspiracy is two or more people acting in secret to achieve some type of goal. And he does explain that more where he's talking about, your friends could be conspiring to plan you a surprise party or something like that. Which, okay, yeah, anything could be a conspiracy if you're going to define it as that. But later on, he starts to conflate theories with beliefs, because people have conspiracy theories about what the government is doing, and then they have beliefs about what the government did in the past due to evidence. So he's trying to conflate the two and say that, a theory and a belief are the same thing, which they're not. So then he goes on and he cites some examples of ones that he thinks are false, like, the CIA assassinated JFK, doctors deliberately manufactured AIDS, a couple other ones. And then he says that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed by federal agents. Now, this one is kind of interesting in and of itself because if you look at COINTELPRO and what COINTELPRO is, you kind of get a different picture than what he's just saying. Oh, it's just so ridiculous that someone could think that the CIA or federal government assassinated somebody, right? So if we look again, I'm looking on Wikipedia because for several reasons I don't really have time to look up all this stuff, and also because if you notice, whenever somebody talks about one of these kind of ideas, they put a pop-up underneath their video, as you can see here, and it's from Wikipedia. So, further in the essay, he starts to contend that people's epistemology is wrong and that they're getting their information from bad sources. So we're just going to go to the sources that, in this case, YouTube would put up if I was talking about these type of topics anyway. So if we look, what is COINTELPRO? It's a syllabolic abbreviation for the counterintelligence program that supposedly only ran from 1956 to 1971. It was a series of covert and illegal projects actively conducted by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, disrupting American political organizations. The FBI records show COINTELPRO resources targeted groups and individuals that the FBI deemed subversive, including feminist organizations, the Communist Party, anti-war, Vietnam War groups, activists, civil rights movement, and the Black Power movement, e.g. Martin Luther King Jr., the Nation of Islam, and the Black Panther Party. So it says right here that actually Martin Luther King Jr. was targeted by the federal government, and perhaps maybe they didn't assassinate him, but he was targeted by the federal government, by this COINTEL program. So here it says, after the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, Hoover singled out King as a major target for COINTELPRO, under pressure from Hoover, the president, to focus on King. Sullivan wrote, in light of King's powerful demagogic speech, we must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation, and from the standpoint of communism, the Negro and national security. Soon after, the FBI was systematically bugging King's home and his hotel rooms, as they were now aware that King's growing in stature daily as the most prominent leader of the civil rights movement. So, I mean, you can read more of that, but basically you get the gist. This government program decided to target political leaders, political individuals that had a view that was contrary to what the government deems as what they feel like you should be thinking. So to say that, oh, it's just this fantastic idea that people just came up with like out of their butt, that, the government targets individuals like, and they might assassinate them. Oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. Okay, so here's the intended effects of COINTELPRO. The intended effects of the FBI's COINTELPRO was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, or otherwise neutralize groups that the FBI officials believe were subversive by instructing FBI field officers to create a negative public image for target groups, for example, through surveilling activists and then releasing negative personal information to the public. Break down internal organization by creating conflicts. Create dissension between groups. Restrict access to public resources. Restrict the ability to organize, protest. To restrict the ability of individuals to participate in group activities, for example, by character assassination, false arrest, or surveillance. Okay, so we can see that the government does do things like this, and so it's not outlandish. Again, you might have a theory that they're doing it in the future, but your belief is that they've done it in the past. So when he tries to conflate theory with belief, it's like basically everything's a theory. If if you go to the sink to get water, it's a theory. You have a theory that you're going to go to the sink to get water because, the pipes might have burst, or, your water might be turned off. There could be a multitude of reasons why your theory and your belief are not the same. Because you might believe that there's going to be water coming out of the tap, but in actuality, it's just a working theory that every time you go to the tap and you turn it on, it's there. The water comes out until it doesn't. So then, on the next page, Cass Sunstein comes out and admits, yes, conspiracy theories have turned out to be true, and under our definition, they do not cease to be conspiracy theories for that reason. That's ridiculous. So if something turns out to be factually true, it's no longer a theory. That's the whole point of a theory. A theory is something that you test against reality, and then when you find out that it's true, then it becomes something else. You could say it could become a belief, especially when you're talking about historical facts, and you're saying, okay, well, I have a theory that this happened, and then it turned out to be true, and then you could say, well, I believe that happened. And then he goes on to say, for instance, the Watergate Hotel was a real thing. Then he says that the CIA did do Project MK Ultra, because this is something that people laugh at conspiracy theorists all the time. But the fact is that the basic structure of the whole Stranger Things kind of thing, where they had kids and different people in these secret government labs doing tests on them, stuff, that was true. And then, of course, Operation Northwoods, a rumored plan by the Department of Defense to simulate acts of terrorism and then blame them on Cuba. It was proposed, but it never went into effect. And that was the only time they ever proposed it, right? That was the only time they've ever proposed to simulate acts of terrorism and then blame them on another country in order to attack that country, right? It's just like, okay, I get it. You don't want to believe in this stuff. You want to believe that the government is there to save you or something, but it kind of gets ridiculous. Conspiracy theories that posit machinations by the government officials typically overestimate the competence and discretion of officials and bureaucracies who are assumed to be able to carry out sophisticated secret plans, despite abundant evidence that in open societies, government action doesn't usually do that. Okay, we get it. This is a very common, defense of the government that people make against conspiracy theories, where they say, it's impossible for the government to keep a secret. It's just impossible for them to do it, especially in the modern day. We have cell phones, we have this, we have that. There's no way that a government agency could keep a secret, right? Okay, if that's true, then tell me one of the most top secret anything. Where's the most top secret military base in the United States? What's the most top secret weapon that the military is developing right now, even in the corporate sphere? Tell me what's the most top secret thing that Apple is working on, or the most top secret thing that Google's working on. What's that? Oh, you can't? Because it's a secret? They kept it a secret? You don't know where the most top secret military base is? But I thought that it's impossible for them to keep secrets. So if it's impossible for them to keep secrets, then you should necessarily know where the most top secret military base is, right? Because it's impossible. It's just not possible for the government to keep a secret, right? Then he goes on more, and just on that same type of logic, saying, consider all the work that must be done to cover up the government's roles in producing a terrorist attack on its own territory or in arranging to kill political opponents, right? He goes on with that. We already went over that. And then he says, in a closed society, secrets are far easier to keep, and distrust of official accounts makes a great deal of sense. So then he's going on to say that, in a country where the press is not free, then you are actually more justified in believing in conspiracy theories. Right? But then he goes on to say, oh, but America, we're so free, and the press doesn't cover up anything. And like, I'm going to get into that whole new Department of Homeland Security leak thing in a different video. I just didn't have time to research all that stuff. But you can see right there, obviously our press is not free. The government was definitely working with like the largest media outlets to cover up or change certain types of facts and things. So what he's saying right there, it's all ridiculous. So he goes on again to say, in an open society with a well-functioning marketplace of ideas and free flow of information, and if it is difficult to do many diverse institutions simultaneously, then conspiracy theories will usually be unjustified, because that's a big point that he has. He's like, whether or not the conspiracy theory is true or not, he's like, are you justified to believe it? And that's a ridiculous way to look at it, because if something's true, then you are justified in believing it for the most part. And then when he's saying, oh, say individuals who live in an authoritarian regime lacking a free press, again, we can go back to the new DHS leak showing that we don't have a free press, people may have a good reason to distrust all or most of the official denials they hear. For these individuals in a society without a free press, conspiracy theories will more often be warranted, whether true or not. So again, the fact that if they're true or not, that doesn't matter, but it's just more if it's warranted or not. So then, see, this is the part where he says that, a central feature of conspiracy theories are that they are extremely resistant to correction, certainly through direct denials or counter speech by government officials. Right? So he's saying that you have like conspiracy theorists have a circular logic, and the more the government denies it, but then he also says that the less free the press is, or the more authoritarian the government is, you also are more justified in believing conspiracy theories. Right? So, again, if you conflate a theory with a belief, like for instance, the belief that, COINTELPRO existed because it's a historical factual thing, right? And then you have a theory that they're continuing to do those similar types of actions in the future, you're justified to believe that. But he's saying, you're not. He's saying, oh, whenever they just shut down one government program where they're doing, MK Ultra type stuff, they'll never do that again. They'll never do. You're just unjustified. We have a free press. It was exposed, even though it was kept secret the whole time it was going on. But we can't keep a secret, though. We can't keep a secret, and it would have been so easy for anybody to just figure out that MK Ultra was going on or that COINTELPRO was going on the whole time it was going on, even though it was a secret. But it wasn't a secret because we can't keep. You see what I'm saying? It's ridiculous logic. It's ridiculous. So then he goes on to talk about how conspiracy theories rise and spread, and then he goes to attack your epistemology, which is, a basic philosophical way to debate somebody. You say that how do you even know what you know is true or false? And if you can't justify your beliefs, then you can't really argue against somebody. But again, like I'm saying, we're looking at historical evidence, and we're seeing that the government is willing to do these type of what people would call conspiracy theories, where they're acting illegally against the interest of political actors, business people, as long as they're considered quote unquote subversive by the government. Now, this is kind of where I'm with the religious people and the monarchists, when you separate church from state, the government itself doesn't have a very strong epistemology to stand on to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, what you ought to do. Because once you separate and you just have like this kind of utilitarian philosophy, epistemology, then all you can do is describe things. You can't actually tell people what they should or shouldn't do. And so for the government to classify certain people as subversive and non-subversive, it's only in a utilitarian sense for the government to continue governing and gaining power over people, because that's the only epistemology that they have, is a utilitarian epistemology. They can't tell you what's good or bad. They can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. All they can tell you is basically how to do something and how to maintain their own system. So anything that's beneficial for the population that's unbeneficial for the government structure is considered subversive, basically. So anyway, he says, perhaps conspiracy theories are a product of mental illness such as paranoia and narcissism or similar conditions, and surely some people who accept the theories are mentally ill and subject to delusions. But we have seen in many communities, even nations, that such theories are widely held, and it is not plausible to suggest that all or most members of those communities are afflicted by mental illness. Like in the case of the 9/11 thing, where 50% of people in New York believe that the government turned a blind eye, then you would have to assume that 50% of people in New York City are mentally ill, paranoid, delusional narcissists. And that just doesn't make any sense at that point. So could it be that some of the theories, quote unquote, are true? Or at least they're justified in believing or looking into the theory of it? Okay, so then this is where the conspiracy of the conspiracy comes in, where he says governmental responses. He says, what can the government do about conspiracy theories and what should it do? Well, you can't tell me what it should do because you don't have any epistemology. But the government might ban conspiracy theories somehow. They've tried that. The government might impose some type of tax, financial or otherwise, on those who disseminate such theories. We've seen that with the Alex Jones trial. Now you get taxed for coming up with theories. You get fined possibly billions of dollars for having your own opinion on a theory. That's like saying, oh, well, I don't believe in the theory of gravity and I have a different theory. Like, I just think that the universe has an up and a down, like some of the flat earth people do. I mean, should you be taxed for that? Should you be fined for believing something that's contrary to popular belief? No. Okay, the government might itself engage in counterspeech and trying to make arguments to discredit conspiracy theories. Okay, we've seen that where they just make fun of, oh, conspiracy theorists, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, even though on page 2 he admits that some conspiracy theories are true, right? Then he says, 4, the government might hire formally credible private parties to engage in counterspeech. So this is illegal. The government hiring people, private parties, to speak on behalf of the government, and especially to try to curtail the free speech of private citizens or individuals or groups. And then 5 is the government might engage in informal communication with such parties, encouraging them to help. Again, illegal. Each instrument has a distinctive set of potential effects or costs and benefits, and each will have a place under the imaginable condition. Our main policy here is that the government should engage in cognitive infiltration of the groups that produce conspiracy theories, which involves a mix of 3, 4, and 5. So basically, the government trying to discredit you, hiring people to discredit you, and then using informal communication with the private parties to discredit you or do other things, harkening back to the COINTELPRO type of stuff. So he's saying part of what he would consider cognitive infiltration to produce cognitive diversity in these quote unquote conspiracy groups. He said, in one variant, government agents would openly proclaim or at least make no effort to conceal their institutional affiliations. A recent newspaper story recounts Arabic speaking Muslim officials from the State Department having participated in dialogues with radical Islamic chat rooms and websites in order to ventilate arguments. Okay, another variant, government officials would participate anonymously or even with false identities. Each approach has distinct costs and benefits. The second risks perverse results but potentially brings higher returns. So basically, again, he's proposing that the government basically sends out spies into your political group with fake identities or online doing it anonymously to discredit, confuse all those things to people in your group and just to introduce false or try to discredit people. So again, we can see that this is a conspiracy theory within itself. This is a conspiracy. Okay, so he goes on to say there's a similar trade-off along another dimension, whether the infiltration should occur in the real world through physical penetration of conspiracist groups by undercover agents, or instead should occur strictly in cyberspace. The latter is safer but potentially less productive. The former will sometimes be indispensable, where the group that purveys conspiracy theories, and perhaps themselves formulate conspiracies, formulate their views through real space information networks rather than virtual networks. Infiltration of any kind poses well-known risks. Perhaps agents will be asked to perform criminal acts to prove their bona fides, or less plausibly, will themselves become persuaded by the conspiratorial views that they have supposed to be undermining. Perhaps agents will be unmasked and harmed by the infiltrated group, but these risks are generally greater for real-world infiltration, where the agent is exposed to more serious harms. Our main suggestion is just that whether the tactical details there would seem to be ample reason for the government efforts to introduce some cognitive diversity into the groups that generate conspiracy theories. Right? So what he's saying is that, they're going to send agents out to your political group because you believe something that's contrary to what the government wants you to believe, and they're going to send agents into your group to either try to discredit you or say different things and try to change the way that your group works, just in any way undermining private citizens or private citizens coming together in a group, which they're allowed to do, and question either what the government's doing or propose their own political solutions, their own political ideas. People are allowed to do that. That's legal. What they're suggesting here is illegal, and they're also suggesting, again, that they should conspire in secret. More than one person in secret should get together and try to infiltrate groups of private citizens or public citizens, public figures, to undermine their actions. Okay? That's a conspiracy. I don't care how you want to cut it. This is a conspiracy. You could say, oh, there's no such thing as a conspiracy, but the fact is that right here, the government itself is proposing a conspiracy to stop conspiracy theorists. And like I said in the beginning, it sounds dumb, it sounds stupid, but this is what they're saying. So we can look at all that. We look at COINTELPRO. We see that the government does participate in conspiracies. And so when Cass Sunstein is saying that, belief in the fact that the government does these type of things is unjustified. Now, I will grant him that every theory that somebody has is not true. But it's the same thing for science, for math, for basically anything, philosophy, archaeology. You can name a subject and name a theory And there's probably been someone in that subject that had a theory that was incorrect. But does that discredit the entire, study of archaeology because one guy found one bone that was misplaced and he didn't get the right dinosaur? Because that's what he's suggesting here. He's suggesting that you just are completely unjustified to think that the government's doing anything. We're just here to help. It's ridiculous. Obviously, there's government conspiracies. He's proposing one right here in his proposed anti-conspiracy conspiracy. And I mean, it's as plain as day. You can see what he's writing right here. He was working for the government, for the Obama administration when he proposed this. And then now, I mean, I didn't even research this. I started researching this before the Department of Homeland Security leak. And I'm going to have to go and look at that because it's just corroborating what I'm saying here. That the government is participating in conspiracies, and at certain points, they're working against public and private citizens, groups, people that are trying to organize politically. And so to me, when people say, oh, well, what's the political solution? And it's a joke to me. It's a joke. Because you got the government agencies actually infiltrating political groups to discredit their leaders and possibly do other things to political groups that are legally and lawfully assembling and are allowed to have their own opinions. They're allowed to have their own beliefs. They're allowed to create theories as long as they're not advocating for violence or harming anybody like that. Why does the government feel that they're justified to do this? You gotta ask yourself that. What are they trying to prove by undermining your group and calling you subversive for you simply just having an opinion? That's contrary to what they want to do, which is maintain their power structure over you. And then to say that, oh, there's no overarching conspiracy, maybe not. I mean, obviously, this thing goes up levels, and then above the government, you've got the international government that's doing similar things. And I don't have time to research all this stuff. It's just very obvious. The guy's saying it right here. He's saying, I propose that we do a government conspiracy to stop conspiracy theorists. And that's a definition of conspiracy. 2 or more people getting together in secret, as he said, secret anonymous agents to do something negative to you or to another group of people. He says, we're going to undermine you. His definition is just, oh, a conspiracy theory means powerful people getting together in secret and doing stuff to you. And then he's saying, hey, we should get the government together in secret and do stuff to private citizens. But there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory. There's no such thing. And people that believe it, they're just misguided. Their epistemology is wrong. That's what he was saying also. He was saying that part, because I didn't even go through the whole how information is disseminated part, which a lot of it is just redundant because he's saying, oh, well, some people get information from people they respect. And some people will agree with an opinion due to peer pressure. And then he's saying that people that are in isolated groups, quote unquote extremist groups, are more likely to have conspiracy theories. And also people that philosophically analyze, the role of government are more likely to have conspiracy theories. But once, that kind of view kind of gets broken down, once you start to look across several groups of people, if you're saying, okay, well, there's this one isolated group that thinks that the Federal Reserve printing money is trying to cause inflation to make people poor. Okay, maybe if you're just in MGTOW and you believe that, but then when it's okay, but white nationalist groups believe that, black nationalist groups believe that, high-ranking economists believe that, independent philosophical analysis people believe that, conservative Christians believe that. Once it starts to not be an isolated group, right? You've got the Occupy Wall Street people that believe that. Ron Paul libertarians all believe this. And they all have different epistemologies. They have different philosophies. But they all agree that the Federal Reserve is printing money and causing inflation on purpose to devalue the currency so people don't have as much economic and then therefore political power in the system. So to say that it's just a fringe conspiracy theory by an isolated group of people is incorrect, because you can see across a broad spectrum of different groups of people that they all believe the same thing, and they have evidence for it, because you can see the evidence of the inflation causing people to have less purchasing power and therefore less political power. But it's just a conspiracy theory. It's just a theory. It's just a conspiracy. You're nuts. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's all they have to do. They don't have to actually disprove that the Federal Reserve is printing money, causing inflation, and decreasing your purchasing power and political power. All they have to do is say, you're nuts. You're a conspiracy theorist, and it's unjustified for you to think that. Why would you think that powerful people are trying to go against you? It's like, duh, because they are. And you can say, oh, there's no overarching thing. Maybe it's not overarching over the whole world, but within the United States, we can see you got the COINTELPRO. You know, you've got things going on where they're doing things. So it's ridiculous for him to try to attack. Basically, he's attacking conspiracy theorists with a conspiracy. And there's no other way to look at it. You can look at the article yourself. You can see the quotes that I posted up right here. I'm not making this stuff up. This guy really worked for the government. He wrote this essay while he was working for the government. So therefore, it is an actual government conspiracy to stop conspiracy theorists. So that's all I got for this video. Have a good day and go MGTOW.